There's global interest in the democratic exercise currently underway in the U.S. The country's electorate will be making their choice between former President Donald Trump and current Vice President Kamala Harris. In the run-up to the poll, there have been polarizing opinions on the impact of either presidency, both on the country's local politics as well as foreign policy. Senior Research Fellow for African Diplomacy and Leadership at the University of Johannesburg, Dr. Oscar van Heerden, joins us now to share his thoughts and perspectives. Dr. van Heerden, good morning. Thanks as always for your time. The main issues driving this election are many, and they include each party's stance on things like abortion, gun control, immigration, and of course inflation and the economy. Which, from your perspective, stand out as decider themes for each candidate, and why?
Yeah, thanks, Iman. I mean, as you say, there's a number of issues, obviously, that is on the campaign trail. But I think the two or three issues that are really pertinent for voters. One is indeed the economy. Always the economy. It's about unemployment. It's about having more money in your pocket. It's about inflation that must come down, the cost of living, etc. So that is an important theme. And generally, the argument is the messaging from Kamala Harris is that, you know, she's promising that it will improve, that things will become better. She will do a better job, unlike the current administration, Biden and Harris. And of course, the Trump campaign is saying that all these issues were much better under the Trump administration of 2016 to 2020. Inflation was down, employment was up, people had a bit more money in their pockets, and they should remember those times, and therefore they should vote Trump. So it is a very, very contested issue as to how they are proposing to actually pull the economy right. Trump also, one of the things in his arsenal is talking about tariffs against China, against other countries, to try and minimize the negative impact on Americans and their manufacturing sector. The second issue is, of course, around immigration. The argument there is that Kamala Harris and Biden's administration has allowed millions of illegal immigrants to cross over the southern border into the United States. This has added pressure on social services, pressure on unemployment and crime, and so on and so forth. And of course, the Trump campaign arguing that, if you remember in 2016, Trump's campaign was saying they want to build a wall, a border wall on the southern border. But generally, the right-wing politics of Trump is saying that they are going to have very strict border control. Illegal immigrants must be deported, even if it means breaking up families and so forth. So a very strong sort of campaign from Trump on that issue. And then finally, to a lesser extent, but there's also the issue of foreign policy, the conflict in Ukraine, the conflict in Gaza. And it's not so much that the Americans concern themselves with the Ukrainians or the Palestinians. No, they are more concerned about the fact that their tax dollars, their tax monies are being given to Israel, as given to Ukraine at their expense. And this is the thrust of the Trump argument. So very contentious issues, a very close race, Iman.
I'm going to come back actually to that allocation because it does have resonance for us here in South Africa. This is the stance that both the Republicans and the Democrats have taken on the issue of Israel. I know it's going to be a very difficult question, Dr. van Heerden, to answer, you know, just at the outset, because it's quite a complex matter. But you know, under whose administration did the U.S. economy do better? I know you talked about the easing of inflation in the earlier part of Trump's presidency, but there were some legacy issues left behind, I think, vis-a-vis debt and the like. So, you know, was a Republican presidency under Trump better for the American people, or has a Democrat economy been better for Americans?
Well, if you look at the numbers speaks the truth. And the numbers is that the economy was faring slightly better under Trump. Yes, the economy is quite strong under Biden at the moment, but the truth of the matter is that the ordinary people are not feeling the benefits of that strong economy. And this is really the point. The ordinary Americans having to put in extra times, double jobs, cost of living is high. This is a global phenomenon, but of course, in this case, the Americans are saying they don't have extra cash in their pockets. And the perception, at the very least, the perception amongst ordinary South Africans is that, ordinary Americans, is that things were better under Trump. And the Trump campaign, I suspect, is winning on that front because the current administration, yes, there has been some green shoots within the economy, but it's not being felt by the ordinary people.
Let's look at that support base now, Dr. van Heerden, and some of the standout developments, and there have been quite a few, but if you look at Arab Americans, many of whom have historically favored Democrats, now shifting towards Trump in this election, it's over widespread anger and frustration over the U.S. support for Israel's war on Gaza. The Democrats support continued military aid to Israel under the Obama administration, and that's something you hinted at. The U.S. signed that 10-year military aid agreement with Israel. It was around $38 billion between 2016 and 2026, of course, continuing under Biden. But Trump has also been seen as an ally. His stance on Israel was one of strong, unequivocal support. He's aligned closely with right-wing Israeli government figures and key American pro-Israel advocacy groups. So what's driving their support, do you think?
Well, I do think that, I think that the issue with Trump is that he's a straight shooter. At least that's what they think. What he says is what he is going to do. And the truth is that he has, in recent weeks, informed Prime Minister Netanyahu that he would like to see an end to the war in Gaza by the time he takes office in the White House. As to whether he's going to stand by that, that's another issue altogether. But I think what Arab Americans and Muslim Americans are responding to is the forked tongue of the Biden-Harris administration. We've seen time and time again, spokesperson after spokesperson at the White House saying that they are very concerned, they want a ceasefire, and 2-3 days later, they ship arms to Israel, they give more aid to Israel. And I think that that's what Muslim Americans are responding to. But I also want to say, Iman, that I don't think that Americans are going to be one issue based. I don't think they're going to vote just based on one issue. I don't think that Muslim Americans are going to vote just because of the Gaza thing. They are also going to have to look at other factors like cost of living. Yeah. What is it that the Trump presidency or the Harris presidency can do for them? Similarly with other minorities, the Hispanics and, of course, African Americans. I don't think women are only going to vote for Vice President Harris just because of the IVF and the pro-choice issue. It's an important issue, of course, but they're also going to take other factors into consideration.
It kind of echoes a little bit for us in the May moment, Dr. van Heerden, when you think about multiple issues driving the decision to vote, either with the ANC if you were a traditional voter there or someone else if you were breaking that tradition. Now, we know the polls are tainted, right? Because it depends on, who you ask and when you're polling. But there are a mix of polls now available. Harris and Trump are touring the swing states, and they're aiming to sway undecided voters there. We've seen Harris in Michigan. Trump was focusing on North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and Georgia. But it seems that in general, this might be hard to predict. Let's explain to our viewers the importance of these swing states, 7, which include Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin.
Yeah, just 2 things to mention, Imam. I don't invest a lot in the polls. We've seen in the last round with Trump and Hillary Clinton how wrong the pollsters got it. I think there's inherent biases with polling, and also I want to make the point that, Trump supporters have been brandished hillbillies, stupid, uneducated, lunatics, and of late garbage. And so when a pollster comes to your door and asks, are you going to vote Trump? It's very unlikely that you are going to say yes, even though you know you are going to vote Trump, because you don't want that stigma. You don't want that stigma to be attached to you. So that's the first thing. I think there's something there. But also, 2, I think on the issue of the swing states, it's really about the Electoral College. These are swing states, not because of any other reason that they're significant, but because of the kind of electoral votes they have in the Electoral College. And the truth is that if you are able to gobble up 3 or more of those swing states, particularly North Carolina and Pennsylvania, whoever wins Pennsylvania wins the White House. That takes you closer to that all-important 270 electoral votes in the college, regardless of how the majority of Americans vote. This is unfortunately the system there. So I do think, Imam, and I know the question is going to come, I suspect that Harris is probably going to get the popular vote, but Trump is going to take the Electoral College.
Oh, and it brings us back to that discussion about whether it's time to revise the concept or the system of the Electoral College, and, you know, whether if you win the majority of votes, then you should win. It shouldn't be the proportionality issue. But there's also a lot of history involved in all of that. And I really wish we had more time to talk about that so we could just understand how all of that works. I have so many more questions to ask you, but I really have to end with one. So I'm picking the one that relates to us, because there's so much to say about which candidate and which administration would have Africa, and particularly South Africa's interests at heart. Because you think about so many initiatives, some that some people might not know as well. The B3W, the Build Back Better World initiative, that's that global infrastructure development plan that was launched by the Biden administration in 2021. And it's so interesting in its design, because it was intended to provide this alternative to China's Belt and Road initiative. This is the BRI, and then, of course, their support for ACFA as well. Then you've got Trump's relationship with African leaders, which was seen as somewhat distant. You think 2018, the US-Africa Leaders Summit, that didn't take place. His administration's approach was more focused on business and security rather than anything related to humanitarian or developmental issues. And then we all know the criticism around his rhetoric about Africa, especially the people countries, that comment, which undermined goodwill on the continent and seemed to have damaged diplomatic relations. I know it's a simplified view, but what's in it for Africa and South Africa? Who wins?
Look, I mean, I think it's quite obvious that the Democrats would be a better choice for Africa. I think that Harris and just the history of the Democratic Party would probably augur well for the rest of the continent, precisely because Trump has really got no eyebrows for Africa. He's made it abundantly clear in his rhetoric and his statements, even when he was president of the United States. So I don't think that a far-right Republican Party is going to be any benefit for the continent. And I would imagine that the majority of African nations would want Harris to win. I'm just not sure if that's going to, if that's going to happen.
All right. I mean, I can't get what's your prediction, can I? Because as you've said, I mean, it's complicated.
It's tight, but usually people don't want to spoil their reputation by putting their neck out. But I'm going to say that the popular vote is going to go for Harris, but Trump is going to take the Electoral College.
Dr. Oscar van Heerden, always a pleasure talking to you, and thank you for your analysis. We appreciate you. We'll talk in the coming days as well.